True.
Swagged up math. We back with ratios and proportions. Got my standards listed. Got a problem ready to go. And I've already annotated so y'all late to class. The amount Troy charges to mow a lawn is proportional to the time it takes to actually mow the lawn. The word proportional, if you see that word, you know that you're dealing with proportions. Or constant proportionality. So I'm encouraging students to remember this formula. Thanks to one of my great colleagues, Mr. Adair, he refreshed me on this. I didn't really use this much in school. I was a proportions guy, but this will work wonders for you if you can get it down. So Troy has he mows lawns, and he charges a certain amount every hour. We don't know that because the particular job he did, he charged $30 to mow a lawn that took him 1.5 hours. They want us to write an equation to represent the amount of money Troy charges for 1 hour. Now, this does not say 1 hour, but whenever they give you a variable, it's assumed. If I write X on the board and ask you what's the coefficient, you have to know that the coefficient is 1. If you do not see a coefficient or a number next to a variable, it's 1. So they're not really saying it, but in layman's terms, they're asking us, how much does he charge per hour? And it's important that you pay attention to the wording just as much as you pay attention to the formula, because if you can't comprehend what they're asking you, you can't answer the question. So, with that being said, X will always, in terms of this formula, X will always represent the amount of time, whether it be minutes, whether it be hours, days, and Y will represent some other quantity. K is always what's constant. And what they're asking for in this question is basically K. They're asking what's his constant rate of charging? Like, what did he charge every hour? And that's the same amount. Hint the word constant. So if I was going to find the constant proportionality of this, understand that finding K is the same as finding D. The variables they chose for this problem were D and H. D represents the amount of money, and I put K here because it's really K. And H represents the amount of hours. So if I did this, carried out the formula, you would find that K is equal to $20, which means that Troy is basically charging $20 an hour. Now, how we need to put that as far as answer forms go, we want to be able to choose the correct answer if they're giving us a multiple choice, open-ended, doesn't matter. So if I'm using these variables, D would be equal to $20 times the amount of hours he works. And even though there's no multiplication sign there, we know that 20H represents 20 times H. So $20 times the number of hours will give you his pay or his money amount. Another way to solve this problem would be setting up a proportion and getting to algebra. Now there's other ways to do this. You can cross multiply and divide. Some people call it the Z method. I like to do this and incorporate algebra as a reteach, as a refreshing step, which is usually the hardest step. I don't know why. It should be the easiest, but for most students, they just get stuck at the part where you're solving equations and you need to make the coefficient 1. So, notice I've set up the proportion for you already. $30. If I put money at the top on this side of the proportion, money has to be on this top, has to be on the top on this side as well. I put X because we don't know how much money he charges for 1 hour. But we know he charges $30 for 1.5 hours. Now, some of you will be like, well, what did you get 1? Anytime they give you a variable and you don't see a number, it's assumed that that variable is 1. So, if I wrote X on the board, that's really 1X. Don't forget that. Very small detail, but a big fact. So, how does ratio, anything that's proportional can be cross multiplied and set equal to one another. So I want to cross multiply these, and that's going to help me find out what x is. 1.5 times x is equal to 1.5x. And 1 times 30 is 30. And now I need to make the coefficient 1 because they want to know how much money does Troy charge for 1 hour. And they don't use the word 1. So that is something that I want you to pay attention to. I'm going to divide both sides by 1.5 because that's the opposite of multiplication. And I'm dividing it by 1.5 because I want the coefficient to be 1. 1x is equal to 30 divided by 1.5. And if you look, this is the same thing we did over here. So it doesn't matter which way you do it, whichever's comfortable for you. 1x would equal $20. And if it's 1x, we won't write it as 1x because we're big boys and girls and we're really doing algebra. We're not playing with this thing. So I don't have to write 1 because it's implied and we know that already. So x will be equal to 20. Troy charges $20 per hour. And they wanted the answer form as an equation, so this is actually your final answer. Any questions, drop a comment. If I made a mistake, hit me up. I'll take it down and do it the right way. But I appreciate y'all, and I'll be right back in 2 seconds with another ratios and proportions problem.